Hello, very good to see you and to meet you and to have the opportunity to discuss a fundamental topic for international cooperation, which is basic keys to manage cultural factors in international cooperation. Indeed, when we want to develop project of international cooperation, we will face a variety of situations because we will communicate and communication is culture and culture is communication. So we have to know more about that. So I was speaking about culture, and so during the first podcast, I show you as an introduction, and I want to keep that in mind. Culture is a multidimensional concept because we have national culture, we have organizational culture, we have professional cultures, and globally it is difficult to grasp and to decipher. So it is then we have different dimensions of a culture which are interacting, and it's creating a variety of multiple intercultural situations, the world of complexity. And usually, culture is compared either to an onion or to an iceberg, but it's showing the fact that from outside you know a part of it, but really not most of it. Because we have an emerged part visible, but we have a submerged part deeper and often invisible. So, what the academic world, what can we learn from the academic production in the field of cross-cultural management? Academic works relate to the analysis of the differences and the similarities are mainly focusing between the national level. So it's that level with the focus. And it shows that we have a huge number of works there, but the majority of them are focusing on what we can call a concept of cultural distance. So the distance between two cultures. If we go back to the history, the first work done on cultural management, not cultural management, cultural studies, show that at that national level, the issues can be linked to six fundamental questions. So who are we? So that's the individual. How are we connected or attached to the world? So here it's a very important concept of the autonomy versus the dependence of people to the others. Third question is how do we think about and analyze our personal and professional situation? So it's related to the important concept of the status. Is the status coming from, in fact, what we are doing, or is that an attributed status? First question is how do we interact with others? So that's focusing on the type of relationship to the others. Fifth question is what is our relationship to time? So that's the perception of time, and it's mainly the perception of past, present, and future because it's our way of considering time, and so most of those results are coming from Western world. And last one, but not least, what is our relationship to space? So our meaning of hierarchical distance, of proximity, one with the others. And so when we are looking after that, so the question is how to manage cultural factors and differences and benefit from the cultural diversities. Here, several thoughts. I will just show some of the way of doing for some of them. So, Pellegrino Riccardi, a consultant, in fact, show that what is culture, it's accepted and familiar element. And he explained that we have misperception usually because we are thinking from our own side. And so for him, it's the idea is to take the best of each culture and try to merge those best elements to create a global mindset. Entrepreneurs, who is really famous in the field of cross-cultural management, his aim is in fact dealing with what he called dilemma, so it's opposition on the same question and how can we solve dilemma And for him, it's in creating Japanese gardens, so that's to say, building bridges, in order to connect viewpoint, because culture is a question of perception. And so it's a viewpoint. It's a construction of our understanding of the world. Julien Borel think that we have three main types of action. Either we can confront between cultures, either we can complain, either we can conform. And for him, the best solution is to conform and enforce and take benefit from the diversity. And all the authors have a different vision. But here, in order to give you some basic elements, in order to manage the cultural factors, I will go to the very basics. And among there, it's what has been said by Edward T. Hall. Edward T. Hall has been one of the first to study cultural dimension in terms of communication. So it's father of the intercultural communication. And we have a lot from Edward T. Hall. He has written a lot of books, specifically on communication and trying to understand the communication between people from different cultural backgrounds. And they showed the importance of the context. So that's the space and the context, so the place where communication is going. And for him, we can have high context versus low, can say rich or poor context. And also he showed the importance of time conception in intercultural communication. I focus on the power effect of culture on communication. One of the most famous books of Edward T. Hall is The Silent Languages from 1959, and through an analysis of nonverbal communication, and he really look after, he pay particular attention to the perception of time and space. His approach refers to the setting, the context, and the surrounding circumstances in which the communication or an event takes place. And he said that every exchange can be characterized by the richness or the poverty of the mediocrity of the context. For him, we have two main types of cultural contexts, which are highlighted. High context culture, which are characterized by lasting relationship, loyalty to the authority figure, implicit communication and verbal agreement, and those ones we can find a lot in Asian countries as well as in African countries. In the opposite, we have low or poor context culture, where relationships are short-lived, communication is really explicit, authority is diffuse, and agreements are written down. It's mainly coming from western part of the world, the US, Germany, Scandinavian countries. That's the first very important dimension that quite a lot of the other authors have to will really keep and try to put in their grids in order to understand culture. Second dimension from Edward Tyrrell that I want to show you is the way in which culture structure the conception of space and time. And for that, Edward Tyrrell developed the concept of monochronic time concept, so it's one thing at a time, and the polychronic time concept, so doing multiple tasks being handling at one time, with time being subordinate to interpersonal relations. So in terms of context approach, so we have the poor media context versus the rich high context. In poor media context, well-informed people maintaining broad information network, and for any decision making, a minimum of background information is required. At the opposite, in which our high context, we have a relatively uninformed individual outside of their own specific areas of expertise, and so behavioral individuals' decision-making requires a lot of information. Going to time approaches, in monochronic approach, things are done one after one. So to do one thing at a time, you stay focused on your task. You meet specific deadlines, you prioritize short-term relationships, and specialization of the individual and decentralized structure. At the opposite polychronic approach, you are doing several things at once. You accept interruption, you change plans at any time, you prioritize long-term relationships. We can consider that there is versatility of individual, and usually in such kind of context we have simple and centralized organizations. So you can see here that from those different perceptions of time, we are really acting differently. And so it's important to understand the conception of time. Um, so we can see that question of understanding the perception, and here I want to refer to Erin Meyer. Erin Meyer is a professor at the INSEAD, and Erin has worked a lot on that question of multi or cross-cultural management. And that's based on her experience, the exploration of business model, and communication techniques from various parts of the world. And so she has created a way of mapping culture. It's an 8-level model, and each level represents one of the keys that managers need to be aware that national cultures can fall between two ends of the same spectrum. It's quite usual to have those kind of opposition between values or ends of a spectrum. And so Erin Meyer suggests before each intercultural situation to observe those 8 axes. Um, the basics of the thought of Erin Meyer, and I think it's important to show you there those elements. It's the need of relative analysis. Things are cultural relativity. So what is important is the relative gap between two cultures. It's not the positioning, but it's the distance. Again, we are coming back to that concept of cultural distance. Everyone will observe the other according to their own position on the spectrum. And it's something that we can see with time management. I am considering that the other are always late or are not doing their own things. But when you're moving from one country to another one, you can have the same reflection and people position differently on the axis depending of your own position. Um, and also, this relative positioning determines then the vision that we have of each other. So this first element is really important. Second one is you have to know yourself and you have to learn to know yourself. Interaction between people from different cultures are influenced by both cultural differences and individual differences. So it's not only a question of culture, it's a question of culture and personality because we have a range of behavior for with each individual. And so it's the importance of knowing where we are talking about when you are immersed in your own culture. It's difficult, if it's not impossible, to become aware of it. So the 8 different axes are the following. The first one is communication between a weak contextualization to a strong contextualization. So here you can see that Erin Meyer used the work of Edward T. Hall, who researched on that question of context. So when we have a low contextualization, communication is good, even if it's precise, simple, and clear. Messages say what they have to say and they are understand as such. The opposite, on a strong contextualization, communication is good when it's elaborate, nuanced, and when it has several levels. Messages are simultaneously said and read between lines. Not everything is said. They are often implied and not expressed outright. Second axis, the evaluation. It's if Meyer say communication is listing what the air says. For evaluation, she said that it's the multiple ways to be polite. So it's between the direct criticism and the indirect criticism. So the direct criticism is when we criticize our colleague who do it directly, brutally, frankly, and indirect criticism, when we criticize someone, we do it gently, simply, with diplomacy. We will use words like relatively, insufficiently, whereas in the first we will use completely, absolutely. In the first case, you can criticize someone in public. In the second one, you can only criticize someone in private. Third axis is persuasion. So in persuasion, in fact, it's between the priority given to principle and the priority given to the application. So when the priority is given to application, the training starts from fact, a statement, or an opinion. Communication begins with summary. Whereas when priority is given to principle, the training starts from the development of a theory and the facts are presented afterwards. Communication begins with theoretical reasoning. Third is persuasion. It's in fact how in fact we will persuade people between the priority given to the principle or the priority given to the application. Uh, then we have the direction. How far do you want to be respected between egalitarian logic or hierarchical logic? Then we have the way that we are deciding, so the decision making. Is that a decision with a small d or a very big D? So it's between consensual logic and imposed logic. Then we have the trust. So it's between the primacy of the work or the primacy of the relationship. So is that the head or the horse? So this axis is it's a way for us to understand whether individuals in a culture are more inclined to trust an individual through the work they provide or rather through the relationship they maintain with the others. So that's why we call that sometimes primacy to work on professional activities or primacy to relationship outside the strict sense of professional activities. Then we have disagreement between the confrontation and the evidence. And Meyer said the needle or not knife. So here the confrontation, so we think that disagreement on different a positive effect on the team or the organization, and so confrontation is accepted. Whereas when we are in avoidance, we think that disagreement have negative effect on the team and the organization, and confrontation is not acceptable. And finally, time management between the rigor, so save time. So projects are viewed sequentially, one task after another, one thing at a time. So it's more the monochronic approach. And flexibility, which is more the soft time. So projects are seen in a fluid manner, task evolving according to the circumstance. Many things are processed in parallel. Interruption are not a problem. So it's more a polychronic vision of time. So when you are mixing that, so when you speak about mapping culture, so it's trying to find where we are. And then you have the positioning. I take here the example between Germany and France. And you can see that in some, in fact, axes, we are quite far. So the distance is large. Whereas in other, for example, evaluation, it's more a direct negative feedback. But when we are speaking about communication, you see that the context is not really at the same level as for example, when we are speaking about trust or when we are deciding. So you see that here we have differentiation. I put here um, also comparison between the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, and you can see that again the positioning. So it's explaining where I am. So I need to know my positioning to understand the distance with the other. And so to do what? Because in terms of international cooperation, what we are doing? We are doing negotiation. And so, and Meyer show us through this article where you have the reference here, that we can map negotiation style in crossing two dimensions, disagreeing dimension and expressing emotion. And so you can see that there, in terms of negotiation, we have huge differentiation between, for example, Japan and Israel, or between Germany, Denmark, and Mexico and India. So it's showing us where we should be, or about what we should be really careful and be aware of the way of doing. The same can be done in terms of leadership, and we know when we are developing international cooperation, the importance of leadership. And so here, the way that she tried to map that is in crossing leading and deciding dimensions. So the way that the decision is taken, top-down or consensual, and the way that leading is in fact done. So is that more egalitarian or hierarchical? And again, you can see here differentiation between those countries or people from those countries. Again, it's a mix of that cultural factor with the individual, but it can give good advice. And as you can see, in such kind of research, most of the countries are from developed world, and so that's to say that it's more complex. We have no data sometimes coming from African countries, even if you would find with some grades. But what is important here, it's more the methodology, so to which factor I have to be careful on. So for that podcast, I will say that confronting to the iceberg, the culture, and in international cooperation, it is really key to manage cultural factor. And there we can see that in a resume, so as a synthesis, the importance of the relation to time, the importance of the relation to space and context, and the importance of the relation to the others. It's fundamental. So try to identify that. Then we have the importance of the relative positioning, which determines the vision we have of each other. So from where I'm speaking to the other, which is where in the mapping. And so whatever the mapping, whatever in fact decide for the dimension in order to analyze the culture, it's really important to know yourself. So in order to face the iceberg, we have the importance of knowing yourself, and specifically also for those dimensions which are really implicit. Because for some dimension like the norms, like the values, usually we can express them because it's what is important for us in order to decide for the action. But relation to nature, relation to the other, sometimes it's things that we have never expressed, because when people ask you the question, why are you acting like that? You don't know, because it's really coming from long, long time. It's coming from your education, it's coming from your relation to nature and so on, to time and to the others. So it was just an introduction to the way of managing factor. And please, I hope that it brings you some ideas and it helps you to manage, in fact, cultural factors in international cooperation. So that's all for tonight and today. And I wish you all the best, and we will discuss other point with a colleague who is an expert in African cultural dimension in management, and I'm sure that it will bring also additional inspiring thinking to your project of developing cooperation with Africa. Thanks a lot, and all the best to you.